الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد, we begin by praising Allah Azza wa Jal, Lord of the Alameen, which is mankind, jinn, everything that exists, and we bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his slave and his messenger. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All of us have heard many talks. All of us have experienced times where we listen to a speaker and we're dumbfounded, we're amazed, we're influenced, we're affected. I just received a message the other day. Someone had forwarded a clip and he wrote in the tag that, subhanAllah, if anyone wants to watch this, it really sent a chill down my spine, or it really tingled my heart, or whatever it may be. Now I want you to imagine not any random speaker, not me or you, not someone online, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sitting right beside Aisha in the darkness of their hut when there's no light in the middle of the night, and he's explaining to her the scenario of Yawm al-Qiyamah. Brothers and sisters, you will hear some random speaker on YouTube. You don't even know where he's from, whether what he's saying is correct or not. You would hear this person speak about Yawm al-Qiyamah, and sometimes it will make you cry. Sometimes it will break your heart. Sometimes it will put you in a state of khashya of Allah Azza wa Jal. Imagine Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaking to Aisha, the greatest human being who ever lived, speaking to a woman who Allah chose to be the greatest female scholar of this ummah. And she was young. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, she was 18. So this is before 18. And they're sitting by them with each other. And he's explaining to her the man who saw Jannah and Jahannam, the man who witnessed people in Jannah and Jahannam, is explaining to her the events of Yawm al-Qiyamah. Imagine what that would have done to her heart. And then the Prophet ﷺ reaches the day of judgment, and he tells Aisha radiallahu anha, Ya Aisha, and on that day, after the first blow and after the second blow and so on and so forth, on that day, all of mankind will be resurrected, naked and uncircumcised. And Aisha, who's sitting there listening to Rasulullah telling her this, stops him and says, Ya Rasulullah, wait. What do you mean naked and all together on Yawm al-Qiyamah? She could not fathom being in a state of undress in front of another human being other than her husband, even though she was completely immersed in the Prophet ﷺ's words on the harshest reality we could ever face, Yawm al-Qiyamah. She had to stop him and say, what do you mean? Like, that's what got to her. That's what caused her to stop him from explaining that day. That's what stopped her fear of Yawm al-Qiyamah. That which when the angels themselves witness, they will scream out, Ya Allah, we didn't do justice in your worship. That caused her to stop and say, what do you mean we're going to be undressed in front of each other? The Prophet ﷺ had to calm her down, Ya Aisha. The situation on that day is far greater than anyone caring whether they're undressed or dressed. My dear brothers in Islam, this is the woman who, when the Prophet ﷺ died at 18, he was buried in her household. 2.5 years later, her own father dies, and he's buried beside Rasulullah ﷺ in the household. So now she's 20, 21. 10 years later, Umar al-Khattab dies, radiallahu anhu. 10 years later, Umar al-Khattab dies, and he seeks permission right before he dies to be buried in her house. And she wanted that spot for herself, but out of her generosity, she said she accepted that Umar al-Khattab be buried next to her father and her husband, Rasulullah ﷺ. From that day onwards, she was 31. she never, ever, ever removed the hijab while she was in her house, because Umar al-Khattab was buried under the ground in that house. Can you imagine that? Compare today and then. The man is dead, lifeless, under the ground, but she would not remove her scarf in her household for the rest of her life. What a family, this family of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Her sister Asma bint Abi Bakr, at almost 100 years old, an old lady, extremely old, blind, sitting in the corner of a house, almost never leaving. Her son Al-Mundhir sends her a beautiful garment from all the way from Iraq. She touches it and she says, it's awful, take it back to him. So he sent back word, oh my mother, it isn't see-through. It's thick, it isn't see-through. She said, but it's tight and it shows the shape of the body. This was the woman who in the last moments of her life, speaking to her son Abdullah bin Zubayr, in a conversation, wallahi, if you have a heart and you would read this conversation, listen to it, you'll cry. But just to take the shahid, the testimony that we want to bring out, basically he's going to die. It's in his last moments. His mother told him, go forth and fight till your last breath. Don't betray the ones who fought with you and died in your path. But give me one last hug before you leave. So Abdullah bin Zubayr leans forward to hug his mother and she touches him. She says, what's this? He says, that's my armor. She said, oh my son, this is not the dress of the one who wants to die as a martyr. Take it off. It will make you more agile and it will allow you to fight better. And instead, put on a long sirwal, a long undergarment, and tie it so that if they kill you, your awrah is not exposed. His awrah. She's almost 100 years old. She's hugging her own son for the last time. And what she's worried about is that his awrah be exposed after he died when he's not even accountable for it. Who are these people? Fatima radiallahu anha, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She enters in upon her father on the deathbed and immediately begins to cry, because her father used to always accept her by getting up, kissing her on the forehead and allowing her to sit in his spot. That's how much he loved Fatima, his only remaining child. This time she saw him in a state where he couldn't even move. She started to cry. So the Prophet ﷺ calls her over and he whispers something into her ear, which made her laugh. It made her cry further, sorry. Then he whispered something in her ear again, which made her laugh. What did he whisper? The first thing he whispered was, Ya Fatima, basically today is the day I'm going to die. There's going to be no pain after today. So she cried. The next thing he whispered to her, which made her laugh, was, Ya Fatima, you'll be the first person that follows me to the akhirah. She laughed when he told her, you're going to die the first person after me. So this woman, this noble woman, her time came. Her time came. She felt her time was coming. The Prophet ﷺ promised her. And she begins to panic. Why? Not because she's scared of death. She can't wait to meet Rasulullah ﷺ. She can't live without her father and her Prophet. She starts to panic because she starts to fear that when she dies, the custom back then, because of the poverty, was they just used to put the male or the female on a piece of wood and put a cloth over that wood so the shape of the body would show. She started to panic and complain to everyone around her that I don't want to be put on that plank and my body, the shape of my body show. She's dead. She's going to Rasulullah. She's already guaranteed Jannah. She kept complaining until a sahabiya, a companion woman, approaches her and says, Oh Fatima, the daughter of Rasulullah, there's a custom in another land where they put basically a mini casket, and on top of that they put leaves, and on top of that they put a covering. So she made her promise that you do that for me when I die, that you bring a few bows, the bow that the bow and arrow, if you bring a few bows around the sides like that, on the top of the strings you place on top of me you place the branches, the leaves, and on top of the boughs you place a covering. But she still wasn't satisfied. She was still in a state of panic that the daughter of Rasulullah have her shape shown to the people. So she made Ali radiallahu anhu promise that he would only bury her at night. No wonder why. This woman was the woman who Allah sent down an angel to this her earth that's never descended to this earth to tell her that you will be the master of the noble women of Jannah. You'll be the master of the noble woman of Jannah. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, one of the greatest blessings Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon this ummah, upon this creation of mankind, in the dunya and in the akhirah, is clothing. Is clothing. Allah literally mentions it as being one of the greatest perks of Jannah when He told Adam alayhi salam, "Inna laka alla taju'a fiha wala ta'ra." Oh Adam, not the palaces and the lands and not seeing Allah. No. Oh Adam, I've given you a Jannah in which you will never go hungry and you will never be undressed. You'll never be naked. Think about that for a second. How essential is food? What happens if you don't eat for 2 days in a row? 3 days in a row? You're going to die. That's how essential dress is, clothing is. That Allah linked it with food. That in Jannah, the greatest blessings I'm giving you is that you'll never go hungry and you'll never be naked. Opposite to contrary to popular belief, the state of undress is not natural. It's not the default. It's not the norm. It's not the fitrah. And proof of this is in the Quran. Not only is it not natural, and it's not the norm, and it's not the default, even between a husband and wife, it's not the default and the norm and the natural thing. There are times, yes, when relations happen. Other than that, it's not the natural, it's not the norm. Proof of this is in the words of Allah Azza wa Jal, where He shows me and you that undress is a sign of Allah's anger upon mankind. Where is this scene? Where Allah Azza wa Jal speaks of the story of Adam alayhi salam himself. And He says, فَكُلَا مِنْهَا فَأَكَلَا مِنْهَا فَبَدَتْ لَهُمَا سَوْآتُهُمَا وَطَفِقَا يَخْصِفَانِ عَلَيْهَا مِنْ وَرَقِ الْجَنَّةِ. And Adam and his wife ate from it, the tree that they weren't supposed to eat from. What was their punishment? What was a sign that Allah was angry from them? He made their private parts apparent to them. And they rushed around trying to look for leaves to cover their private parts. So contrary to popular belief, undress is not the norm. It's not the default. It's not the fitrah. The fitrah is what Adam and Hawa did, which is they were in Jannah. They've never experienced undress. They were created on fitrah. They were in Jannah on fitrah. They weren't corrupted. And as soon as they were undressed, they rushed to cover themselves. That's the fitrah. That proves our fitrah and our natural state is to be dressed, not undressed. And a state of undress is the sign of Allah's anger upon us, upon this world. May Allah Azza wa Jalla protect us and our families. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, the Sharia came to protect us from harm. The Sharia came to protect us from harm. The entire purpose from beginning to end of the Sharia, of every single ruling, is to protect us from harm. It's to maximize benefit and minimize harm. From these maqasid, these absolute outcomes of the Sharia, the scholars, they categorize it into three. Darurat, absolute necessities. Hajat, a lesser necessity. And tahsiniyat, the extras in life. The darurat, the absolute necessities, are 5. Preservation of your deen, preservation of your life, preservation of your mind, preservation of your family and your lineage, and preservation of your wealth. Think about that for a second. Every single ruling of Islam branches out from these 5. Every single ruling of Islam stems from these 5. Every single ruling of Islam comes back to these 5. And the concept of haya and modesty, and all the rulings attached to it, of lowering the gaze, of khalwa, between a man and a woman in a room by themselves, of free mixing, and of the dress code, all come back to these 5. This is the mechanism, modesty and haya and all the rulings attached to it. This is literally the mechanism Allah has given me and you in order to preserve these 5 absolute necessities, life and death necessities of life. So what's the importance of haya and modesty? The Prophet ﷺ, he mentions in a hadith that shyness is a branch of iman. Shyness is a branch of iman. He mentions that modesty and belief come together. Listen to this. If one of them is removed, the other is removed. This is a saying of Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. Shyness, modesty, and iman come together. If one is removed, the other is also removed. That's why he told us the most common saying of all the previous nations and all the previous prophets is what? If you have no shame, then do whatever you want. There's no iman, there's no hope, there's nothing left after that. Prophet ﷺ tells us that shyness does not bring anything but good. In another hadith, he says all of shyness is good. All of modesty is good. When he saw a man reprimanding his relative, his brother, because he was too shy, the Prophet ﷺ stopped him. He actually intervened and stopped him. He said, leave him alone, for verily modesty is a part of iman. Your Prophet ﷺ himself was more shy than a virgin in her or behind her veil. Your Prophet ﷺ himself, the greatest man who ever lived, the best of us, the walking Quran, the perfect example of how Allah wants me and you, was more shy than not another male, than the weakest point at the female, the most shy and shameful position for a female is a virgin behind her veil. Think about that for a second. The man we're supposed to emulate was shyer than the weakest point of a woman. Doesn't that tell us something? Isn't he the one we're supposed to follow and try to be like? Doesn't it say something when we're far from shyness and modesty, whether it be male or female? If that's the golden standard, you can literally gauge your iman based on how far close or far you are to that standard, male or female. And there's people around. Wallah, I remember a sheikh online, he mentioned a story about a doctor. A doctor narrated this story because I was approached by a husband and his wife, old lady, niqab from top to bottom, and she had a problem with her eyes. And she entered into the doctor's and she was hysterical, and she was shaking and she was shivering and she was making sounds and she was crying. He thought it was from the pain. When he came to check her eyes, she would step back. When she came to check her eyes again, unveil the niqab and check her eyes, she stepped back again, and her husband would try to hold her down, and she would step back. Then he turned to her husband, what's wrong with her? Like, I'm trying to help her eyes. If she's in pain, I'm trying to help her. He goes, no, she's not doing that because she's in pain. She's doing that because she has to uncover her eyes for you. Her haya was that high. Too high. She was crying, she was panicking, she had to uncover her eyes. Which the majority opinion says you don't need to cover. He goes, haven't you told her it's a necessity? He goes, I swore oaths by Allah that it's a necessity, but she won't accept. He goes, then were you able to bring her here? He said, I tricked her into coming by telling her that Allah wants you to read Quran and Allah wants you to look after your kids, and you can't do that without your eyes. That's why she agreed to come. This is the haya of Islam. The shaitan does the opposite. The shayateen of jinn and ins, the shayateen of mankind and of people, do the opposite. Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us in the Quran, Wallahu yuridu an yatuba alaykum وَيُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ أَن تَمِيلُوا مَيْلًا عَظِيمًا. And Allah wants to accept your repentance. He wants to purify us. But those who follow their desires want to digress you into a great deviation. My dear brothers in Islam, my dear sisters in Islam, why the emphasis? Why this much emphasis on the concept of haya? Why this much emphasis on the concept of modesty? And all the rulings that go under it. Thousands of rulings under the, what's it called, under the lowering of the gaze, under the free mixing, under the khalwa, under the concept of dress code. Thousands of rulings. Why the emphasis? Because my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, wallah, you know what's sad? Back at the time of the Sahaba, they had to imagine the consequences of not following Allah and His commands. They had to imagine what type of harm would come. Today we don't have to imagine, look around. Look around, this concept of haya and modesty, the lack of this concept, the almost non-existence of this concept. Look what it's doing. How many brothers and sisters' deen has been destroyed because of this concept? How many have sold their bodies, sold their deen for a small price of this dunya? For a female, for a male, for zina? How many lives have been lost? How many lives have been lost from this concept? How many fights, wars, death over haram relations, over zina, over girlfriend and boyfriend? My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, how many minds have been lost when they give in to the desire and their lust and their emotions? Wallah, I'll tell you stories here in the center. Here in the center, brothers and sisters of deen, people of masajid, the things they've done, the levels they've reached, the sacrifices of their deen and their families that they've made for the opposite gender. And that's good. That's the best of them. I've had a mother say, if my daughter committed zina, I would ask her, at least was it with a man? If it was yes, I'd be happy. That's the point we've reached. At least it's not with a girl. At least it's not homosexuality. That's the point we've reached. How many families have been destroyed? How many lineages? I just received now, what's it called? I just received a screenshot from one of the brothers, I think in the UK or in America. A girlfriend and boyfriend, after 6 years, they realized they were brother and sister. They done DNA tests, they will realize they were brother and sister after 6 years. Brothers and sisters, wallah, this thing is not a joke. Look at my hands. Do you know the cases that I've taken on of brothers? Alhamdulillah, I don't take any sister cases on. I pass them on to the sisters. Do you know how many brothers, victims of sexual abuse, I've had to sit with and watch cry for 2 and 3 hours before they can say a word? Put yourself in my position. Wallahi, as early as 9 years old. As early as 9 years old. 10, 20, 30 years later, they still come to see the Shaykh. They've never said anything in their shaykh for 2 hours. You think it's not widespread? You think it's 1 or 2 cases? Man, not even in deal in this field, and I've had more than that. Do you know how mentally draining it is to sit in front of someone and watch them cry for 2 hours, not being able to say anything, not being able to help them? Why? Because we destroyed the concept of haya and modesty. We hypersexualized the community to such an extent. Can you imagine a 10-year-old boy raping a 9-year-old boy? That's the point we've reached. What? Yeah, well, I don't want to say anything out of line. What type of parents have allowed their son to be hypersexualized to the extent where at 10 he's raping his 9-year-old relative? These are the cases we're dealing on the day to day. You know what one of these brothers said? Subhanallah, our deen had the answers from 1400 years ago. He goes, I'll never, ever, ever, ever let my kids sleep in the same bed with their cousins, even if it's the same gender. Our deen told us at 7, At 7, that becomes haram. But we don't care about the deen. We don't care what the Quran and Sunnah says. You know these cases? Most of them, their parents don't even know what they've done. I had a case, he was literally saying, he goes, I don't know whether to be angry at my parents or angry at the guy who raped me's parents. He goes, I don't know who to be angry at. My parents for letting him sleep over in my bed, and that's where it occurred. Or his parents for what did they do to allow their kid, 10 years old? My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, wallahi, it's not a joke. The deen came to protect us. And we just, yallah, who cares? We throw aside the rulings of Allah and His Prophet as if they're nothing, as if we're wiser than astaghfirullah, Allah and His Prophet. We know better. Like they're nothing, they're alright, they're nothing. That's why, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, I don't believe it's a problem of what's halal and what's haram. I know this is supposed to be a fiqhi lesson, but I don't believe it's a problem of halal or haram. I believe we know full well what's halal and what's haram. It's very simple. Men, cover navel to the knee, including the knee. Women, cover every body part except for the face and the hands. Yes, the Ahnaf give the exception of the feet, but they didn't give that exception based on dalil. They based it off qiyas. The Hanafiya, when they gave the exception of the feet, they based it on analogy. So just because the face and the hands are not a place of sexual desire, that's why they're allowed to be shown. Similarly, the feet, not based on any hadith, are not a place of sexual desire. Therefore, the feet are also allowed to be shown. I ask you by Allah today, with all the filth and trash and fetishes that are out there, are the feet not a place of sexual desire or not? So based on practicality, I don't take that opinion. The woman, face and hands, up to and including the wrists, is supposed to be covered. Lowering the gaze is a fard for men and for women. And Allah directly links it to protecting your privates. Lowering the gaze is the gateway. Looking, you've opened the gate. You can't free mix unless the absolute necessity is there. You can't ever be in a room by yourself with another woman, even if you're teaching her Quran, which is the best, because the Prophet ﷺ said the best of you are those who learn Quran and teach it. If the best thing you could ever do, you can't do it in a room by yourself with another woman, imagine anything else. Now fast forward and look at the women who go into a room with a male gynecologist, lock the door and open their legs to him. Or the man who goes to the center to do a scan on whatever private part, and he's okay with the woman doing it for him by themselves in the room. But who cares? I know better than Allah, astaghfirullah al-azim. I'm alright, I'll protect myself. What's the condition for these types of clothing? In a nutshell, it's actually very, very simple. I'll summarize it for you. Without going into specifics, you'll know the rest. Anything that causes a mafsada or a fitna or causes attraction is haram for men and for women. Very simple. Anything of clothing or adornment that causes a mafsada, a fitna or an attraction is haram. So if your clothes are see-through, does that not cause does that not cause a fitna? Does that not cause attraction? It's haram. If your clothes are thin, tight-fitting, they show the shape, does that not call, male or female? I see brothers here coming out of the gym and their pants are so tight, their baggage is showing. That's haram. They're in a state of sin. I see brothers here, wallahi, their crack is showing as they're making sujood. It's in salah in the masjid. This is haram. You see sisters wearing a jilbab and abay from top to bottom, but then there's the last part of the ankle that's showing. This is a major haram. Because you're disgracing the deen, you're mocking Allah Azza wa Jalla and His rulings, you're defeating the purpose. or that wears the hijab and lowers it to here. You're mocking Allah. Wallahi, you're mocking Allah. Allah told you to wear that in order to remove attraction, in order to cover, and you caused more of a fitna. And you say nothing's going to happen. Wallahi, you're going to see the consequences in the dunya and in the akhirah. Because this is causing a major fitna in the community. Why do you think there's a specific hadith about those three people who Allah will never look at in the what's it called, on Yawm al-Qiyamah? One of them is what? The kasiyat ba'ariyat, ma'ilat mumilat, right? The one that's dressed but naked at the same time. The one that's dressed but naked. I ask you by Allah, does that only apply to the women? The bloke who wears those, what do they call them, skins? Skins, nothing, just skins. Down here, thinks he's covering from navel to the knee. I ask you by Allah, is he not from the, I know kasiyat is in the feminine, but does not the same principle apply to the men? What a disgrace. The women are asked to cover from head to toe, and you're only asked to cover from navel to knee, and you can't even do that. And you call yourself a man. Wallah, you're not a man. A male is too much for you. And then he has the audacity to go point out other women. Look how she's dressed and look how she's acting. How corrupt does a mind have to be to not be able to be that blind to himself? How hypocritical must one be to be that blind to himself and that, what's it called, critical of others? This is a disease of the heart. And those stores that sell these types of clothes, just to let you know, O Muslims, you're held accountable for every person that wears them. So when the hijab stores sell those types of hijabs, know that you've taken the sin of the thousands that do it. If they sell those 7/4, those 7/8, those abayat that are 7/8 on purpose, it's called 7/8, so they can show that 1/8 is in Jahannam on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Know that, multiply that by the thousands that bought it, you're getting the sin for it as well. So based on that simple principle, apply it to everything. Tight clothing, see-through clothing, clothing that's so colorful it attracts the attention, that's haram, male or female. Clothing that imitates the disbelievers, something that's specific to disbelievers. So, I don't know, the robes of a monk, of a Buddhist monk. That's known to be a robe of a Buddhist monk. You can't wear it and say, oh, I'm just wearing it because it's style. It's not. Preservation of deen. That's haram. And the Prophet ﷺ, he saw Ali radiallahu anhu wearing a certain garment that was known for the disbelievers. He told us, that's for the disbelievers, take it off. Imitating men and women. Prophet ﷺ cursed the woman that imitates the man and the man that imitates the woman. He cursed them. The Prophet of Rahmah cursed them in Bukhari and Muslim. I'm not making this up. And now it's clear. Now it's clear. I just told you the 10-year-old boy is raping the 9-year-old boy. Why? Something's happened. Something's happened in regards to the sexualization, in regards to the concepts of modesty and hayat. They've been exposed to that gender fluidity, that everyone's the same. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, adornment, makeup, perfume, striking colors, literally anything that falls under these two conditions of causing a mafsada or a fitna or causing attraction becomes haram. But again, I repeat, this is not the problem. That's not where the problem lies. We know this. The problem lies in our iman. The problem lies in the fact that society and fashion and random nobodies on the streets are more important for me to please than Allah. I'll repeat that again. I don't care how harsh it is. The problem does not lie in what's halal and what's haram. Most of us know it. The problem lies in our hearts, in our iman, that which Allah is going to hold to account on Yawm al-Qiyamah. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. No one will enter paradise except with a pure heart. That we would rather submit to social norms, to fashion trends, please nobodies on the street, than please Allah. That's where it lies. You know what Allah describes these people as? You know those brothers that wear a certain thing amongst a certain crowd and wear something else amongst others? You know that sister that takes off the hijab at uni and then she wears it on the train back home as she's walking off the train? Allah Azza wa Jal, He describes a few ayat in the Quran. Listen to this. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, لَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا آيَاتٍ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ وَاللَّهُ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Please pay attention to these very, very dangerous verses. We have certainly sent down distinct verses, clear verses, mubayyinat, very, very clear, and they're unambiguous, right? And Allah guides whom He wills to the straight path. So it's not about not knowing the truth. It's about who's guided and who's not. Who's going to follow and who's not. وَيَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالرَّسُولِ وَأَطَعْنَا. And they say, look at the translation, but the hypocrites say, we have believed in Allah and we believe in the messenger and we obey. But that's a believer. A believer is the one who believes in Allah and His messenger and obeys. Allah calls them hypocrites. He says, but the hypocrites say, we have believed in Allah and we believe in the messenger and we obey. ثُمَّ يَتَوَلَّى فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ وَمَا أُولَٰئِكَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ. But then a party of them turns away after that, and those are not believers. Just like the brother and the sister that tells you today, I believe, I know this halal and this haram, but then they walk away from there and they still doing that halal, they still keep doing that haram. وَإِذَا دَعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَهُمْ إِذَا فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. And when they are called to the words of Allah and His messenger to judge between them, so today Quran and Sunnah, to judge between them, at once a party of them turns aside in refusal. They refuse to come to get the judgment of Allah and His Prophet. Listen to how specific it is. وَإِن يَكُنْ لَهُمُ الْحَقُّ يَأْتُوا إِلَيْهِ مُذْعِنِينَ. Listen to this. But if the right was with them, they would come to Him promptly, rushing in obedience. أَفِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ أَمْ ارْتَابُوا أَمْ يَخَافُونَ أَنْ يَحِيفَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ وَرَسُولُهُ بَلْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Is there a disease in their hearts? Or have they doubted? Or do they fear that Allah will be unjust to them or His messenger? Rather, it is they who are the wrongdoers. Allah's calling them hypocrites. Allah's calling them kuffar. Because He says, is there a disease in their hearts? Hypocrisy. Or have they doubted? Do they doubt Allah? They've left Islam. Or do they fear that Allah will be unjust to them and His Prophet? So they've left Islam. If Allah is unjust, Al-Adl, Allah is Al-Adl, you're calling Him unjust. You're directly opposing His name. Allah Azza wa Jal then goes on to say, إِنَّمَا كان قول المؤمنين إذا دعوا إلى الله ورسوله ليحكم بينهم أن يقولوا سمعنا وأطعنا وأولئك هم المفلحون. Really, the true believers are the ones who the only statement that they'll make when they are called to Allah and His messenger for judgment is that we hear and we obey, and they are the ones who are successful. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, al-halal bayyin wal-haram bayyin. The halal is very clear and the haram is very clear. Bring me the most ignorant Muslim, walk him into a hijab shop, walk her into a hijab shop. Let them look at those clothes and wallahi deep down inside they know whether that's halal or not. So that's not where the problem lies. The problem lies in here. You know, I remember that story in France where a Muslim lady came to the counter, and she was the lady behind the counter. So a Muslim lady, foreign to the land, so she's an import, went up to the counter, no hijab, no Islam, no deen, nothing, and found a niqabi that was serving her. So she grabbed the items and she started to put them with anger onto the desk in front of this French lady, this niqabi. So the lady looked up and told her, is there something wrong? Do you have a problem? She goes, yeah, why are you dressed like that? Go back to your country. So the lady undid her niqab and she goes, I'm French, born and raised here, and my parents are French, and my grandparents are French, and my great-grandparents are French. You're the one who's come to this country. But that's not the problem. That's not the matter here. What's the matter? The matter is that you came here and sold your deen, and I bought it. We bought it. We purchased it. You sold it, you gave it up, and we purchased it. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, you can't be a believer and reject Allah and His Prophet, His rulings. You can't. Allah Azza wa Jalla literally says, وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولَهُ أَمْرًا أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِم. Listen to these verses. It can't be a believing man or a believing woman that when Allah and His Messenger decree a matter, that you think after that you should have a choice in the matter, in the affair. It's not possible. Because belief means submission. Islam means submission. You can't claim you believe this is haram and you still openly do it and you never want to change it. Or attack the ones that are applying it. It doesn't work. It's not possible. The only way that we can be true believers is in that verse where Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who believe, if you believe, udkhulu fi silmi kaffah. Allah emphasized that word 6 times. It's mad lazim. That means you have to. You know how this dallin, you have to say it 6 harakat? This is a must. According to the Shafi'iyya, if you don't extend that 6 harakat, you've actually nullified your prayer. Because the Fatiha hasn't accepted. This word kaffa is emphasized also the same must 6 times. Allah is emphasizing 6 times completely, unequivocally, so wholeheartedly, without any doubt or any hesitation whatsoever, that you accept Islam and all of Islam. وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. And do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan. إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ مُبِينٌ. Verily he is to you a clear enemy. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, this is where the problem lies. This is where the problem lies, in the heart. The halal and haram are known. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal that we can apply what is being said. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal that we can live up to that which we believe in. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal that we can call others to applying their deen so that the ummah as a whole is elevated. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal that He allows us and helps us to protect those 5 absolute essentials of life. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to protect our families and our lineage. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal that we can be of those who protect and defend and propagate this deen. Ameen. And I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to never ever make us face a calamity like these cases that we've been getting. Ameen. Jazakallahu khairan. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.